What up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Nerd Gen Report. I'm your host, Pablo, and joining me, as always, is Mr. Brian Schultz. MI8, The Final Reckoning. Is it really, though? But we saw it yesterday. Tracy saw it also. Haven't gotten a chance to get his take on it. How was your theater?
I mean, it was sold out.
Okay.
I went actually pretty late at night, and it was sold out. People were sort of they were pretty into it. I mean, they kind of responded to a couple of the scenes. I would say, I don't know. It's hard to tell because I mean, we'll talk about it, but they make a choice about sound in this movie for one big stretch, and I think like it's hard to tell how people are feeling because like it's quiet, right? Everyone's quiet. No one like applauded when the movie was over.
They did in my
That's
not it wasn't
interesting.
like a standing O or anything like that, but there were some people that were clapping for it. I didn't clap. And not because I didn't like it, but yeah.
So how about yours? You say clapping, but like were they into the hits and the jokes and like were they into that stuff throughout the movie or no?
There were some chuckles here and there. There were some, not, no one necessarily cheered, but I guess there was that sort of when something is over, when something is that intense and is over, and you get this, you get this gasp of okay, like what next, right? So it was that sort of thing. My theater was quiet too. They were really quiet. They did clap at not. It wasn't an Endgame type situation. It wasn't Infinity War type situation. It wasn't that. It was tame. It seemed like people generally enjoyed it just to escape. But I have to say this: there was certainly a message that Tom Cruise wanted to give to us with the entity and all that other stuff. But
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
people were listening, people were paying attention.
Well, there's a lot of cruise stuff here, which I think is worth talking about because I do think if you take the combination of Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning and how that was handled and the content of these movies versus the prior six, I think there's a noticeable shift that I think is very deliberate and is really emanating from Cruise himself. We'll get into it. But what were your overall impressions, like just in terms of this movie, and then we'll do a quick ranking of the eight MI movies to date, on the assumption like this is, if not the final one, there's something else different coming for the franchise. So, what did you kind of think overall?
I was entertained. I was I was engaged. Some things went on for too long, yo. I'm sorry. I know Luthen has a beautiful voice and stuff like that, but he gave too long monologues, yo. Like,
Well, I agree with you. I think the movie is incredibly bloated. I think the movie is incredibly self-aware, and I was the way you said your lead, I think is the right take for a lot of people, which is you hesitate and then you very slowly say, I was entertained. So
yeah,
that's not what
they don't want
Maximus
to. They
would
don't.
want. That's not what Maximus would want you to say in response to his question.
Yeah.
But I think that's what it is. Like there are moments in this movie that still remind you that this franchise does things that no one else does and does them practically and has the star of the franchise do things that no other lead would probably attempt. But I think I was overall modestly disappointed coming off of Dead Reckoning. And I step back and look at the combination of Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning as something of a misstep to end this cycle of the franchise. This franchise most definitively, to me, peaks in the progression from 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
And what comes after, which I do not think is a coincidence, and I want to explain why at some point. What comes after is a noticeable step back. And I think when I got to the end of this, I said, good for them. I'm glad they made it. Like there's definitely scenes in this movie that I'm glad are on big screen. I saw on big screen, but we and hopefully they seem ready to do something different.
I appreciate Tom Cruise's longevity in this series and the things that he attempts, because you go through the exposition. I mean, some of it unnecessary, but you go through the exposition of how impossible this mission is. Right? This is Mission Impossible. This is it, the expectations of this weren't exceeded. They remained the same throughout the series.
Well, I think to your point, they sacrifice what I would consider some of the fundamental tenets of Mission Impossible to make this more of a Tom Cruise as a god vehicle. I believe what we saw in these two movies, but especially in this one, are a direct reflection of the response to Top Gun Maverick. And here's why I say that. There's a clip of Steven Spielberg running into Tom Cruise telling him, "You saved cinema." I think Tom Cruise lives his life every day believing he did. I'm not dismissing the impact of Top Gun Maverick in sort of rallying people back to the theaters in true blockbuster fashion, but I do want to point out that Spider-Man No Way Home came 5 months before that movie and made more money at the box office. So the idea that Tom Cruise single-handedly is the reason we still go to the movies today is simply not correct. But I believe these two movies reflect his acceptance that that is reality. Why do I think that? Apparently, Tom Cruise is going to give us a welcome message before every movie he makes for the rest of his life. That strikes me as incredibly egocentric and unnecessary. And the second he got on this time and did it, I was like, oh, we're doing this again. Like, how many movies is this? 3 movies in a row now where we've done this? Like, so that's number one. Number two is the content of these movies has shifted from, as you said, the mission is impossible to only Ethan Hunt will always do the right thing and is only capable of doing the impossible thing at every turn. And I just think that shift in focus is ironically part of why this series went through its slump early on. What makes 4, 5, and 6 as good as they are is the team. It's the team aspect of the missions and who they had making up the team. And by the time we get to this movie, it's not to say the team had nothing to do, but they didn't really have a lot to do, comparatively speaking, right? I mean, what they were asked to do, there was some fun little stuff in there, but like, if you compare it to what they were doing in Fallout and Rogue Nation to help him, it's not even close. Like, this is 98% on him doing crazy stuff. And everyone else saying, he's the only one. Oh my God, he did it again. The people in the movie are saying that. Like, and it's just that balance to me doesn't work. It's not that it's terrible. As you said, like, he still does things on screen that are incredible. And like, you tip your cap and you're like, I don't quite understand how they did that, effects or otherwise. And that's really cool. But when you get to the end of it, at some point, it's just like, what are we servicing here? Like, I feel like I'm like, did I just become a member of the Church of Scientology when I walked into this theater and I didn't realize it? Like, what's happening? So there's just a little bit of that that's just too much and it's off-putting.
All right. So the flying scene with the planes, did that go on for too long?
I actually enjoyed that scene. So here was,
I did too, but I think it was a bit long.
I really liked it, but so here's the thing about, but this happened in Dead Reckoning too, right? With the train, where it was like, how many cars of this train are going to fall into the ravine before we resolve this? The issue with the biplane, and this is, although I think it's my favorite scene in the movie, to be fair, they did save the best for last, and I don't have a problem with that. But this movie showed to me in its biggest set pieces, they're kind of running out of ideas for things for him to do. Because if you think about the idea of him hanging off the side of a plane, they already did that in Rogue Nation. Granted, it was a C-130 cargo plane and not a biplane, so it looks cooler here because he can dangle from different angles. But the concept of what they're doing is something they've already done.
Mm.
And this was true of the underwater sequence as well. Was it a different underwater sequence that needed him to do it without, ultimately without tanks and what? Yes, but they did that in Rogue Nation too. And this was my thing of like, I started to see like you're riffing the same stunt because you can't come up with a new one. And I'm not disrespecting the quality of the stunt or the quality of the filmmaking because it's 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit of like,
repetitive.
Yeah. Are you at the point now where you just have like, there just aren't any more vehicles. There just aren't any more things to suspend him off of. And so you're just kind of replaying the hits, which a lot of what this movie was replaying the hits, even right down to these big set pieces. That being said, that's still my favorite piece of the movie, and getting to it at the end was very enjoyable. And I did enjoy watching sort of the wonder of like, okay, I know he's actually on that plane, and I know that plane is in the air, and I just think it's like, how are they pulling this off to make it look like they're that high and there's no wires and stuff like that. So I actually didn't hate that scene, but I did have that same feeling of I've been here before a little bit.
I felt like it was a bit too low for me. I was like, okay, like, damn, you know, and this dude doing his, I liked, what's his name again? The actor, the villain.
Isai Morales.
Ever since I saw him in La Bamba, he was great. He was great. I wish I would have seen a little bit more of him. He turned into the mustache twirling guy. You know what I'm saying?
But
I
that's
wish I
like
would have seen a little bit
like
more.
everyone else on the cast sheet, though, which
Yeah.
we'll get to.
What did you think of the beginning with all the montages and all the things, the attempt at putting the pieces together for us?
I mean, it was a little forced, right? I mean, like, but I don't hate it. Like, I tend to give when you have a successful franchise like this, you definitely get some latitude to feel yourself and do some things like that. Yeah. With the idea that this is how you're going out, you know, like if you want to do some stuff like that, I am okay with that. I think it's really cool when you can achieve that. Like, I think part of what makes Top Gun Maverick much better as sort of a long-term successor than this movie, and certainly the last two, is the idea that I believe there is only one actual flashback to original Top Gun in that movie for 5 seconds, and it's Goose dying, right? It's him pulling Goose out of the water as he's looking at the photo, and it's less than 5 seconds. I actually think that's part of the brilliance of that movie, is that it's 35 years later, and there are so many callbacks naturally occurring that you as a fan of the original are smiling and remembering. But if you hadn't seen the original, you're still along for the ride. This movie, obviously, the fact that you have to do that many flashbacks kind of tells you this movie is sort of saying it cannot stand alone. We have to do this for you to understand what it is we're trying to accomplish. And it slows the movie down. The fact that the last two movies are each 3 hours long is unacceptable.
Yeah.
No Mission Impossible movie had been longer than 2 hours and 20 minutes until the last two. Again, not a coincidence. Again, both those movies come after the Tom Cruise saved movies.
What did you think of his introduction to the entity?
Why don't we just talk about the entity? I think one of the primary failings of the last two movies is the use of the entity as the villain. I've seen people that think it's cool,
like a background thing, right?
It's more just how the entity is manifested. So we've obviously seen rogue AI as a villain before.
Yes.
But think about how Skynet is handled in the Terminator franchise as the best example of this. You always know that Skynet's talked about. It's always in the background. It's always referenced as like this thing, this invisible hand that caused Judgment Day.
Yeah.
But when you watch the movie, Skynet is manifested entirely as one person, the Terminator, right? Whether it's the T-100 and T-800 in the original, the T-1000 in the second. I don't acknowledge any of the others. So you're focused on the villainy of Skynet entirely through this one person, and therefore it works because you still have this connection to a compelling villain in both cases, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Robert Patrick. This series of movies tried to make Isai Morales that character.
Yeah.
And while he delivers a good performance, I think the way they wrote the AI itself as a villain, it made it too nebulous of a foe for Ethan Hunt and the team. Like if I compare it to they're up against, Solomon Lane, or they're up
Yeah,
against the, Henry Cavill as a double agent for the Syndicate. Like that's much more compelling as like a mano a mano than this idea that like Gabriel was a figure in Ethan Hunt's past, but now he's an agent of this all-seeing, all-knowing, intangible force around the world. It just there's something about that just didn't land for me at any point in this. And by the time we get to the end of we're treating the entity kind of as like a digital blob that we have to redirect into this one place that we can kind of capture it. I just was kind of over it. I just was like, I'd rather have seen Gabriel be the mastermind of an actual villainous plot rather than what he became, which is he was cast aside by the entity and running his own agenda.
yeah.
So I think there's a villain problem in these two movies, but especially in this one.
But nonetheless, I mean, if you think about the Matrix, and how they represented that whole thing.
Yeah, and how'd that end up? How'd that end up when he was at the Machine City by the end?
I mean,
it sucked. Like, it's my point. When it was Agent Smith as one dude, and it was 3 agents moving as a small unit, it was cool, right? That was pretty nasty. And then you had like Smith as this very cool character. But then by the end, when it's like he's sitting there as the Messiah character talking to the machine face, and then he's
when we get to the wizard.
Yeah, when it's the Wizard of Oz, it's like I'm like, when is this over? So the same issue. What did you think of all the callbacks? What did you think of the attempt to make Mission Impossible 3 and the attempt to make
I mean, as I'm hearing you talk and I'm thinking about the films, I mean, Mission Impossible 3 had nothing to do with none of that, That was a mission to save humanity from this virus. And it all made sense.
Yeah. I actually did not like that moment in the movie because we'll talk about the rankings. I actually think one of the things that makes Mission Impossible 3 fun is that you never find out what it is he went to get. That movie's flawed.
This is the John Woo joint, right?
No. Mission Impossible 3 is the J.J. Abrams one.
Okay. The one I'm talking.
John Woo is the one with Thandie Newton where he fights Dougray Scott on the beach in super slow-mo, and they're talking about the biotoxin that's going to wipe out. That's John Woo. That's not what this is from. This is from Mission Impossible 3, the rabbit's foot.
Like.
Foot that he steals at the end to try to save his wife from being executed. And he gives it to Philip Seymour Hoffman. That's 3.
Okay.
But my point is, in that movie, they call it the rabbit's foot, and they have this conversation with Simon Pegg about what it is. And it's basically like nobody knows what it is, but they call it the anti-god, just like something so spectacular and evil that you can't even talk about it or know it. I actually think it works that they don't ever reveal what it is. So I kind of felt like, oh, we're actually going to just ruin that now? We're going to, as opposed to leaving you in suspense and always speculating as to what it was, they very clearly define what it is. And I'm kind of like, oh, so it's just this piece of code. That's what he was stealing.
Okay, so did you like Mission Impossible 2, the John Woo joint?
No, it's my least favorite. It'll be at the
bottom. That's most people's least favorite, but I enjoy watching it because of
I'm not saying I enjoy the action because I enjoy John Woo.
Yeah.
But I think the movie is preposterous, and I don't like Dougray Scott at all as the villain in that movie. I think he's terrible. But that being said, I love that he's the villain in that movie because it means he never became Wolverine. For people who don't know, he was offered Wolverine.
He was supposed to be.
He turned it down to do Mission Impossible 2. So that's my biggest plus one for Mission Impossible 2 is that Dougray Scott turned down Wolverine to be the villain in MI2, which became instantly forgettable. And Hugh Jackman gave us the 25 years that he did.
Yeah. That's one of those movies that I like watching for the action. The action was pretty cool.
Yeah, but can you even stand the rest of that movie at all? Like I'm like, if he's not at Biosite and if he's not on the motorcycle, I think the rest of that movie I can't even get through anymore at all.
I mean,
Tandy
Tandy
Newton,
Newton.
young Tandy Newton. Yeah,
She was
yeah,
beautiful. She was
she still
beautiful.
is.
Yeah.
And their kid is about to be a megastar. Tandy Newton's she's married to a screenwriter, and their daughter is about to be Astrid in the How to Train Your Dragon live action movie coming out in a couple weeks. That movie's
Oh,
obviously
okay.
gonna be a big deal. Yeah, she's about to blow
Yeah.
up. That's Tandy Newton's daughter.
Okay.
So anyway, Rabbit's Foot.
How old is she?
She's like that actress is probably 20.
I mean, again, Ryan, it was a bit excessive, but I didn't mind it because of how long this is going. There's been, you know, to tell us something that we don't know, and we literally thought that these movies were individual movies that just stood apart, but somehow they were all connected. That was the okay.
But this one, but see, my issue is though that like these movies became connected starting with 4, right? So 4, Ghost Protocol. At the end of Ghost Protocol, he's walking off into the distance, listening to a recording, and if you listen to the recording, it talks about the Syndicate. And then 5 is the Syndicate, and then 6 is the resolution of the Syndicate and Solomon Lane. It became serialized, and it worked really well that way. So this movie spent all of its time trying to make 1, 2, and 3 serialized in retrospect, right? Because you get, which I did not enjoy, the Shea Wiggum character, he just knows all along is Jim Phelps' son. That was pretty forced.
Mm-hmm.
And I like Shea Wiggum as an actor, but like for Ethan Hunt to just literally be face to face with him and tell him, "Oh yeah, you're Briggs, but I know your real name is Phelps, and you're John Voight's son." Basically, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Did I need that?
Mm-hmm. It's like their attempt at making crazy stuff. Like they go to the max with stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
With situations, and it's like, I mean, I get it. These are it's Mission Impossible, right?
Yeah, no, that part I didn't mind. That part I didn't mind. The whole like, the thing I minded about the plans, like I said, was just I felt like the team was too disconnected in the piece, and like the pieces that the non-cruise people were asked to do felt too secondary for the most part. That's what I didn't love about it.
Okay, so the team. So
yeah, we'll get to it. Because we'll get to it. We'll go through some of the missions. We'll do our rankings. But if you think about the missions in some of the movies you like the most, I think part of what makes them the best missions is what the other people have to do and are shown doing. Cruise, the series revived because Cruise, by necessity of where he was in his career, accepted a less is more role. And then as he became a megastar again with Top Gun Maverick, he reassumed full control of the screen in addition to Final Cut, which he always has. And I think the franchise suffers for it. And I will go so far as to say I am not convinced Christopher McQuarrie actually truly directed this movie.
So
I think Cruise basically.
Rock moves?
Yes. And the reason I say that, Christopher McQuarrie, several years ago, delivered a rant about fan service. A rant where he said, quote, "Fan service and fandom is poison. It's deadly. And it's only great when applied like a very strong spice, judiciously. If you happen to have seen the other movies, great. I don't count on it. Because what happens when you add callbacks is I'm asking you to leave this narrative and remember another narrative and then come back. In which case, 2 things are certain to happen. 1, if you know the previous movie, you left the narrative and I have to waste precious energy bringing you back while trying to immerse you in a story so that you're not aware the story is happening. Or you haven't seen the other movie and suddenly you think everyone around you in the theater knows something you don't. And in either case, you've disrupted the narrative and broken the chain. End quote. That is the director of this movie prior to the making of the last one. How do you reconcile a director who states that and believes that so obviously and then creates what this movie is so obviously on screen? It breaks everything that he's talking about here.
Yeah.
Which makes me think Cruise with Final Cut was like, McHugh, I love you. We're good friends. I'm going with this.
Yeah.
That's my theory.
And it's not far-fetched. It's not far-fetched. I mean, I'm just thinking about that. How do you stay in a place where you're humble without? Because I can understand the wanting the control because of the vision that you have.
Yeah, I'm not saying Tom Cruise doesn't deserve that role. He's earned it more than any other star. He has durability for 40 plus years.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I think he lost a little. He's fallen victim to his own personal narrative coming off of Maverick.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing that on screen in sort of in a way that teeters on unhealthy. It's not unentertaining. It's still entertaining. Don't get me wrong. It's still entertaining. But I really believe when we do our rankings and you really think through the other parts of this series in particular, the highest of highs in this series occur when he is the star player on what is clearly a team, a championship team. And when it's just him and the other people are really far down the call sheet, which I feel like is the case in this movie, they're just not as, the movies just aren't as strong.
Yeah. What I wanted to ask you was like, give me a comparison or reference to the type of team that you've seen in movies before that where you say this worked.
Absolutely. Look at the final set piece in Fallout, right? Which, by the way, you referenced the biplanes. The final set piece in Fallout is what? 2 helicopters, right?
Yeah,
kind of similar, right? They're trying to, anyway. But look at the cutting of his part of the mission, which is he needs to get the key, catch Cavill, and fight him on the cliffside. So that's cool. But then put that with Luther is working with his ex-wife to disarm the bomb, and Simon Pegg and Ilsa are running around trying to find the other bomb, which then leads to a really awesome close quarters fight scene with Solomon Lane in the cabin. Like, the balance there is actually pretty good. Like, what Cruise is doing is certainly improbable, but like, you know, Benji and Ilsa fighting Solomon Lane, and like, you know, Benji's getting hung by the ceiling and she's got like, that's really compelling. Like, if you're in the moment, you're like, this is incredibly intense, and like bumps that Rebecca Ferguson is taking in that fight are just ridiculous. And you're like, I'm just as invested in what's going on there. And Ethan Hunt needs that just as much as he needs whatever it is he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have that juxtaposition of like, yeah, this really is like a team where they are completely dependent on almost equally improbable things on both ends. Mm-hmm. Likewise, I think the sequence in Rogue Nation where, for example, when they take the prime minister, he can't do it without Jeremy Renner. It's the two of them who get into that office, right? And then have to get the code, defeat Alec Baldwin, relay the information. Like, my point is, it's not Cruise on his own.
Tom Cruise is doing too much in this movie.
But this is a like when I thought this like back in Mission Impossible 2. One of the reasons I don't like it as much is the same reason. That team is only 3 people. Luther's kind of marginalized, and Cruise does everything. And I think when his career faded, he does less in 4. He does amazing stuff, right? He still climbs the Burj Khalifa. Only he gets to do that. But if you look at also the number of lines he has in like 5 in particular, he doesn't talk that much. He's like a physical presence, and he passes the ball. And I think it works better when, like in 5, Renner has more to do and Benji has more to do, and you introduce Ilsa and you spend time with Solomon Lane. Like the balance of the movie works better, and it peaks in 6, right? Because 6 you get Vanessa Kirby and you get Cavill and you get these and Angela Bassett. Like your supporting cast is also just what they're given to do is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a Mission Impossible team. It's not one dude. And certainly not one dude where everyone else in the movie is talking about him like he is Superman. This is the Tom Cruise cinematic universe. That's what this movie became, right? It sort of connected everything together. I really think like he's looking at that superhero thing. He's like, I may not play Iron Man, but he's like,
I'm my own superhero.
I'm my own superhero. And the line between Ethan Hunt and Tom Cruise is blurred. I really am this guy.
With movies. Yeah, Tom, you all that for the don't go crazy.
Yeah, I know it sounds like we're killing the movie. I don't mean to say it that way. It's just like the movie's still entertaining. Don't get me wrong. It's just like
it is. It is.
Like it's still worth seeing,
but it's a little bit too long.
Yes, it's just this. Yeah, it could have been 7 and 8 could have been better, and I think that was a consistent theme throughout both movies. Is they kind of lost a little bit of the secret sauce that really made 4, 5, and 6, but 6 in particular, 5 and 6 in particular, like top notch. What did you think of the underwater sequence in this one? I'm dying to know what you thought.
I mean, after a while, when it got towards the end, when he's taking off his clothes, we're like, yo, how does this dude?
Okay.
It's like, come on, man. Speaking of, I was watching with my wife John Wick 4, the last one, and I'm like, you can't fall like that and get up, yo. This. I know this is in real life, but I need to believe what I'm watching. Unless you're a superhero that can fall and take those that type of damage, I get it, Superman. These dudes are still regular dudes, yo. They're defying physics here.
Yeah.
So it was a bit much for me, but still, I was still watching to see how he gets out of this. Like, oh my God, how does he get out of this one? You know what I'm saying? It takes you, it just keeps taking you. It's like opening a box within a box within a box within a box within a box.
Some of the choices were interesting. I think this sequence is going to be a little polarizing because there isn't as much in the vein of sort of spectacular stunt, like in the moment. It's more of a cumulative and almost trying to bridge the
slow
gap.
Burn.
Yeah, and it's almost trying to bridge the gap between like underwater realism and like, as you say, something truly impossible. So it's like on the one hand, you're like, this dude is in Arctic water in his boxer shorts.
Like right, no way.
Right,
Yo,
right.
How long was it for him? I understand when you go somewhere, it takes a long time, but coming back, it's like shorter, feels shorter.
So here's the funny thing, right? So this is where you're like, and I get it. We're totally nitpicking and having fun with this. So he first goes in the water. He's in the wetsuit, and he is doubled over, teeth chattering. They gotta like put him under a hot shower for hours. And he was in that water for how long before the sub crew rescued him? Like 2 minutes, 60 seconds.
Yeah.
And then he goes way under the surface, 500 feet or whatever it is, to the shipwreck. And he's in his boxer trunks trying to swim up after he's been down there for like how long?
Not down there, Brian. Going further down. That's what I mean. For me, I was like, come on. You know what I'm saying?
But the best part is that then of course the Benz winds up getting him, right? And you're kind of like, oh, now he runs. So you made it that far. We're totally making fun. It's movie making. It's Mission Impossible. Our sense of disbelief has long since been suspended. The thing I thought people will be curious is, again, there's no music. It's very quiet. There's almost no words. I think he says one line. And it's very much like, hey, we're just going to show you the claustrophobia of like being in this sub and like moving around. Like, it's not like the individual movements. That's my point, is he inside the sub are like somehow, oh my God, he's doing like the Langley break-in, right? Where like in Mission Impossible 1, where he's having to be balletic on the rope and there's no noise in there, but the drama is much different, right? Because what he's doing is like, oh, you can't make a sound and your temperature can't go up. This one doesn't have that. It's just quiet underwater for a long time. And then the parts that are kind of more spectacular, honestly, as you said, are him like hanging off the side of the sub. And it's like, is he really hanging off the side of like what? How are they? That's where I'm kind of like, that effect is really cool because I'm like, it does look like there's a sub there. It does look like there's a sub like going past his half naked body. And I'm like, that looks really cool. But there aren't as many of those like, wow, oh my God, it's not going to happen moments. It's just a really long, quiet underwater scene.
Yeah. When he just started going further, then he got to take his clothes off, and for me, it was like, no
twice,
way.
by the way, I was like, Tom Cruise wanted to show, like, at 60 some odd years old, he's still,
still has the
yeah.
I'm instantly taken back to the Reacher movie when he's standing there without a shirt. I'm like, you don't look diesel, yo. Jack Reacher.
So the funny thing about that is I couldn't tell. We're on a tangent here. Yeah. I couldn't tell if in this latest season of Reacher they were actually like kind of riffing or poking fun at that because of the time where they have Alan Ritchson stripped down and then he swims like 2 miles in that surf and then gets out and he's ready to fight. And I'm like, are they making fun of Tom Cruise right now because he had his shirt off in the Reacher movie and didn't look like this?
What else, Brian, before we do our ranking?
I think for the movie, that's probably fine. I mean, I think, look, they don't. Well, how about this? Let's do this. The movie doesn't end with a definitive ending, right? It tries to create that sense of, oh, he might die. They do, spoiler alert, kill some characters, which by the way, I had a problem with that scene. Spoiler alert, spoiler alert. I had a problem with Luther's death scene. Just because we didn't really have the buildup of him being sick. He just went from, I got to go off grid, to now all of a sudden he's got a terminal illness. And I kind of felt like that was disrespectful to Ving Rhames, who's been the ultimate good soldier to this franchise. And it is the character's best friend. I felt like to make that leap off screen was a bit.
Yo.
And I was like, I think Luther Stickle deserved, I know the monologues you could say got a little long, but I think the character deserved a little more on screen if we were going to do that, which I didn't have a problem with killing one of Luther or Benji. I thought that actually was a fair choice to make, but I just didn't like wait, why is he why is he in scrubs? Why is there a bed? Like there's something here we missed that I think would have been emotional to see on screen. So I would rather Luther have fallen ill in 7, I guess was my way I settled on it. Why not have something in Dead Reckoning where, as opposed to him saying,
ended with that,
I need to disappear, why not have a trauma or something occur that causes Luther to fall ill, and that's part of the cliffhanger? I think that would have mattered more to us. But it doesn't end. So the team is him, Greg Tarzan Davis, Palm Clementiev, who I thought was also sorely underutilized in this movie, and Simon Pegg. So they're all still around. And I guess we're supposed to assume that the AI is in Tom Cruise's possession, and off we go. So they could do another one, but I'm really hoping they don't.
Yeah. Maybe they got to stop him. He becomes Doom.
Well, that would be full circle because John Voight played Jim Phelps Sr. in the first one, and Jim Phelps was the leader of the IMF team in the TV show.
Brian, that's not a bad idea, Brian.
If they could get Cruise to do it. Listen, man.
Get Cruise to do it and then get Glenn Powell to replace him. He's the new guy that they put in there to get it.
I love it because he and Cruise are so tight. The funny thing is, one of the best, I still think to this day, one of my favorite Tom Cruise performances and one of his best iterations of himself is him in Collateral, which is villainous Tom Cruise. He is amazing in Collateral. And I always wanted to see Tom Cruise be a bad guy more after I saw him do that. And this would be that, right? This would be like a version of that Collateral character.
Yes.
And I think it would be pretty awesome if he was willing to do it. So there you go. There's our idea, right? We just handed one to Paramount right there. You want to bring it back and have it be an event. Tom Cruise gets corrupted by the rogue AI. And now they got to stop him.
That would be dope. So you want to rank it, or
Yeah,
do you want to give it?
let's do a rating on this movie, and then we'll rank all 8 quickly.
All right. For me, Brian, I would have to say 3.5.
Okay. Okay, I think that's fair. I'm at a 3, but I think it's the same. It's the same idea. It's like worth seeing. Go see it on the big screen, right? This part of the parts of this movie like are why you go to the movies. No arguments. But as we went through and probably spent more time on the flaws of this movie, I think are evident, and it is too long, too long.
Yeah, yeah. I'll say this before we get into the ranking. I When I watch Mission Impossible, it's not one of those movies that I look forward to seeing other than, or it's out, I'll go see it because it's Tom Cruise and the action is good. It's not because I'm not as I'm not as knowledgeable with the Mission Impossible universe as I am with the superhero genre and the movies and stuff like that, you know? So I only remember certain action sequences and I know the
Okay.
type of movie it is.
Interesting.
So
So you're ranking it on feels, kind of.
yeah, I'm not ranking it because like it was there was anything memorable. I just remember the hits. I don't remember the real storyline or anything like that. I remember obviously the characters that are involved, but what they did, there are certain things that I remember from each of them, but it's very fragmented. There's nothing
Interesting.
cohesive about the storyline here, and which they try to do here somewhat, but still left me like I still don't remember nothing, from those movies. I just remember the action sequences. That's it. The
Well,
situations.
so that's interesting because I feel like you're probably not alone in that, and that probably will, to Macquarie's point about fan service, will probably alienate some people that went to see this. Now, the audience reaction to this has been pretty good. It's been better than I think mine was. It's been an A- cinema score, which is the same as the last one. I have a different relationship to it than you do because I think parts of this franchise are among the most rewatchable movies ever made. I probably rewatch 4, 5, and 6, and to a lesser extent, Mission Impossible 1. But I would say I probably watch those movies multiple times every year. Every year. Like if I'm bored, if I see them on a flight, I'm just like, I don't have anything else. I pop one of them on. And I never
Yeah.
get tired of it. So I see them over and over again. So I probably have a little different relationship to the IP than you do.
Yeah.
But
So
but
this is actually Brian's top 10 ranking.
no, but this will be a good comparison because you have someone who's
Yeah.
sort of like a casual consumer of it and the impressions that left versus someone who's in the weeds on it, watching it over and over again. So, okay. So just keep that in mind as we go through the rankings here. So we'll start at the bottom. So you already said
Okay.
what mine was. I have Mission Impossible 2 as the least of the franchise. The John Woo, I'll give you the context too. It's like the John Woo directed with Tandy Newton and Dougray Scott.
Listen, man, I liked John Woo back then. If y'all ever seen The Killer,
Oh, yeah.
which is
Hard
like a
boiled.
classic, yeah, yo, those movies I like them joints. Cause yeah, it's like John Wick. It's like the original John Wick type movie. That's what the Killer was for me.
Woo in America too. It took him a little while, right? Because like Hard Target's a pretty tough watch. The Van Damme down south movie, and
Yeah. That one is.
then like Broken Arrow's kind of like it's not there, but there's some
Yeah,
signs. Like he's getting some
I
signs,
like watching the John
right?
Travolta
Right.
the
But there's some
performance.
signs, and then he figures it out in Face Off. Face Off is where it's sort of like it hits. Like he gets the
Yeah,
balance of the Americanization with the stuff he does well. And so ironically, Mission Impossible 2 comes right after that. And it's like it still has the Woo signatures, right? There's some action stuff that is like, as you say, is awesome, where it's like on the beach, slow-mo, doves, like he does it. But it's just the structure of the story and the team just doesn't, for a Mission Impossible movie, doesn't quite get there. And so that's why if you ask me in the Woo catalog, I'd watch Face Off 9 times for every one that I would rewatch Mission Impossible 2.
but you know what scene I like from Mission Impossible 2 where he doesn't realize he kills his friend and he only realizes after he sees the bandage,
The ring,
and
yeah.
then you see Ethan running out and taking. Yo,
They're the best.
that
The
that
hard
joke
rock version
was
of the theme,
dope.
and yeah,
That joke was dope, man.
I agree.
So there's some things in Mission Impossible 2 that I really like. It's not like I said, my ranking. Like I don't even remember Rogue Nation like that. I remember I
Oh,
don't.
you should rewatch Rogue Nation. I think you will have a different opinion of it if you rewatch it. But
Okay, I'll rewatch
you
it.
should
I'll
watch
try
5
to.
and 6. Like watch Rogue Nation and Fallout back to back after this is over, and then
I
just
like Fallout. Fallout was, I think, that movie. I said, yo, this is one of the best action movies I've seen in years.
yeah. I would expect. Yeah, I think that's yeah. Well, we'll get to that
So,
one. Yeah. So is two. What's your least favorite or least memorable Mission Impossible movie then?
okay, the one I remember the least, and not to say that the movie was bad, but I barely remember Mission Impossible 1 other than him jumping out the window and in slow mo and things exploding behind him or things breaking apart. Some glass. I don't remember too much of that.
Interesting.
Him
Okay.
being interrogated with the dude that was in this movie. I don't. I
Kittredge.
don't.
Yeah. Okay.
Jumping off with a train and hit it was. I only remember the hits. The trailer is what I
Interesting.
remember.
Okay. Interesting. Wow, that's a take. Okay, so you have Mission Impossible 1 as the least memorable. Interesting, because it is the oldest. And in fact, another callback to that, if you notice that they wrote May 20, did you notice they wrote May 22,
Yes, yes, yes,
1996? That is the
1996.
date Mission Impossible 1 came to the theater. That's
Okay.
the nod there.
I was like, I guess you would know. Outside of that metadata, what did that mean in the movie?
I think it was supposed to connect people they were connected to who were killed, but I don't know that the date itself was meant to signify anything other than fan service.
That's what. That's the.
It was supposed to be like, because you're supposed to believe Hannah Waddingham's character lost somebody, like a family member, on that day, but they never make clear
in that movie.
Yeah, in the movie. But the date they choose is just meant to let people know we remember the day when Mission Impossible 1 came out. Yeah, we didn't even get to that. The Hannah Waddingham, Tremel Tillman, like this series got to the Fast and Furious point of like, we're gonna have some famous people pop up for 2 seconds, and the whole point of this is just to say we got famous people in here, right? The stuff we criticized Kevin Feige for a little bit. It's like, I don't know why these people are here. And I'm not saying they're bad. Like Tremel Tillman's pretty good in this movie, but I'm like, it's just him because they wanted to get him from Severance to do this.
Yeah.
You know? So, all right. So you have number 1 as least memorable. I have number 2 as worst. I actually have this movie as the second worst. Final Reckoning. That's my 7th ranked.
Wow.
I think by all said and done, it's going to be remembered as the second worst of the Mission Impossible movies. I just, for all the reasons and all the flaws we talked about, despite it still being entertaining, it is not tight enough in my mind, or it reaches the standards of some of the other ones to where I think it is in this bottom tier.
I don't remember this movie is Ghost Protocol. All I remember is the shot, the poster with them in hoods, and that's it.
Okay.
All I remember. I don't even know if I saw. I think I'm like. My wife doesn't remember any movies, yo. She doesn't remember any movie. She has to see it, and it'll be like, okay, I saw that. I remember this. It's starting to come back to me now. I don't know if whether I see Ghost Protocol and say I'm at that stage. I don't know if I saw it or not.
This is becoming really interesting, I think, for the audience, because it's really what you're doing to me is actually really undermining what they tried to do in Final Reckoning. It's sort of underscoring that they made a mistake, right? If there's a lot of people like you who like passively saw it or came and went and saw it, and then you're trying to make it mean something to these people, you're kind of like, why am I bothering, right? Like, okay, interesting. So you have Ghost Protocol second least memorable. I have Mission Impossible 3 as the 6th ranked movie on my list. It does have a great villain. Philip Seymour Hoffman is really awesome in this movie. But I do think it gets. This is in the peak. This is when Tom Cruise was like jumping on the couch with Oprah and, you know, chastising Matt Lauer. This is like Tom Cruise in the wilderness, and it's sort of a weird movie with like the introduction of Michelle Monaghan as his fiance and some of the other stuff. So It's just not an awesome Mission Impossible movie overall, but it does have still has some cool stunts. And Philip Seymour Hoffman kind of, I think, alone elevates this a little higher than he's memorable in some ways more than the movie is. So I have that as sort of 6th ranked.
Yeah, I remember that sequence where he has his loved one right in front of him, and you know what I'm saying. And I remember that sequence. But again, for me, none of these movies are like so memorable. I think I only remember Mission Impossible 2 because at some point they were showing this a lot, and that's the one I was watching.
Interesting. Okay, so yeah, so you would have, so then would you have 3 next as well? Would that be your number 6?
Because you know what's happening? What's happening now is me trying to remember these movies.
Yeah.
And they're a blur, yo. They're a blur.
It says something that you don't, though, in the sense of like you obviously remember like the Marvel movies and DC movies and Star Wars like the way you do, right? So it's kind of saying that this as a franchise is more of the moment. It doesn't stick with you.
It doesn't stick with me not much. Like I said, I like Mission Impossible 2 because of the stunts and the action sequences and
it's
the
gonna be a
little
great take
things.
because you're gonna have MI2 high, maybe if not near the top, and like you're gonna be like the one person. It's like nobody like
Yeah, that was a movie that really didn't bother me that much, yo. Not to say that everything was great in there. Yeah, the villain was. I didn't like his performance too much, but for me, it's always been about Tom Cruise and what he can do in these films.
Okay, so then I would say Dead Reckoning for me would be the 5th. And I think this is important because Dead Reckoning ends what I would consider to be like the bottom tier of these 8 movies. I think there's 2 defined tiers of quality. And I think 7, for me, 7, 3, 8, and 2 are the bottom tier. And Dead Reckoning is still a really good movie, but it's too long. I don't think the stunts are quite as cool. And as I said, the stuff that we see more in excess in 8, you see in 7. So I would have 7 as the 5th ranked movie. 7 only came out 2 years ago. How well did you remember 7 when you went to see this one?
That's Fallout, right?
No, 7 was Dead Reckoning. That's the one with
Dead Reckoning.
Yeah, where the AI
Dead
gets
Reckoning.
introduced.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. It's one of those movies that I think for me, I find entertaining, but I didn't see the whole thing to really say, but again, I only watch these movies for the action sequences. This
Did
other
you
stuff
like
that they're
those
talking
though?
about? Huh?
Okay, so with the Dead Reckoning one, so then the train sequence at the end of Dead Reckoning, do you like, if you're grading just that, what would you give it? Is that a 10 out of 10? Is that a 7 out of 10? Like, because for me, it's too
I
long.
would say that's what I was gonna say. It's too long. It's like this movie. These action sequences last too long. For me, for the time that is necessary to get some of this stuff done, we're still doing this. This is longer than the time we have left.
Yeah.
So it just like doesn't make sense. It just does. It's too long. It's too long.
Yeah.
Okay. But you enjoy to see how he gonna get out of this.
Yeah.
That's why you stick around.
So then to me, the top tier, we're out of the bottom tier. The top tier, you got 4 movies left. The bottom of the top tier to me is Ghost Protocol. I think Ghost Protocol is actually in some ways the most important movie in the franchise because this franchise was dead coming off of MI3. MI3 was a box office disappointment. Tom Cruise as an actor was increasingly non-bankable, in part because of the Scientology thing, in part because the whole Katie Holmes thing goes off the rails off screen. Like, he has a lot of bombs in kind of the stretch leading up to, and like, honestly, he's still making decent movies in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
But Ghost Protocol, and if people know the history of Ghost Protocol, you know what I'm talking about. He was supposed to be written out of the series as of Ghost Protocol. The original version of that movie has Jeremy Renner taking over as the primary agent. That's why William Brandt is brought into the franchise. And midway through the process, Christopher McQuarrie enters the franchise, rewrites the script to preserve Tom Cruise and Ethan Hunt as the lead. The movie winds up being a huge commercial success and critical success, and it totally changes the direction of the franchise and saves it. So while I consider it the fourth best movie in the series, it is in some ways, as I said, the most important, because I don't believe you get 5, 6, 7, 8 without 4 being what it became. And 4 does have, some really cool stuff. So the Burj Khalifa scene, there's that, right? He's climbing the building, and which they did. You also have, this becomes the first time where you're really starting to have the recurring team members be more regular, right? So Simon Pegg is back. Ving Rhames has always been there, but then now you're starting to have a little more repetition. The villains are just okay. I actually really like the Kremlin stunt. I think that's very Mission Impossible, where they dress up. They've got that little fake camera thing that makes the hallway look like it's there, but it's not there. That to me is true Mission Impossible stuff. It isn't that it's some ridiculous Tom Cruise stunt, but it's using these cool gadgets to pull off these improbable achievements, right? And I think that I prefer some of those sometimes to the Tom Cruise is putting his body through the ringer and might die on screen type stuff. So I really like Ghost. I really like Ghost Protocol from that standpoint. I just don't like it as much as what comes after.
James Bond without the gadgets doesn't work.
Yeah, Q is the glue.
Obviously, Fallout is one of my favorites. I would have to say Fallout is number one for me. I don't know in terms of memorable action sequences and just Henry Cavill as a character. The ensemble was dope. So I think that movie was for me one of the obviously the best movie for me.
So you would have Fallout 1. You would have Mission Impossible 2. Is that fair?
Unfortunately, I know people gonna go crazy and say that you out of your mind. But for me, if you look at that movie, it's not that bad, other than the villain being not great.
Okay.
Outside of that, the stunts and nothing seemed too long. Everything was really quick. The motorcycle scene, everything was quick.
That's key. All right, so you have Fallout 1, you have 2, then you're left with kind of Rogue Nation and Mission Impossible 3. That's somewhere in that 3-4 slot for you. Interesting. So for me, the original is number 3. I still think it is groundbreaking. I think if you were to go back and watch it, the Langley break-in is spectacular. I think the train scene is really cool. It is very different. You do see the age on it a little bit, with Luther talking about the tech of 1996 that's supposed to be futuristic and how it looks with Brian De Palma shooting it. It's definitely different. And it's not a perfect movie. I remember at the time being we were so hyped for it. And it was worth seeing, but I remember being after it first came out, I kind of was that's fine. But it wasn't necessarily, back then I was a teenager. If you compared that to True Lies, I'd have watched True Lies 5 times for every time I watched Mission Impossible 1. And I'd say that because True Lies was Arnold's version of this, right, as Bond, and Cameron and Arnold's version of being a spy. And that came out 2 years earlier, and I would have said that's a much more entertaining blockbuster than Mission Impossible 1. But Mission Impossible 1 over time has probably become to be viewed as maybe the as good, if not better type of movie. So then I think you're left with, I don't think you're wrong. To me, the 1A is Rogue Nation and Fallout. I personally have Rogue Nation number 1. That to me is the most fun I have with these. And I think it is the best, it just has very Mission Impossible-y stuff. The scene at the Vienna Opera House where he's fighting in the rafters. That underwater sequence to me is very Mission Impossible, where it's he has to hold his breath for 3 minutes while Simon Pegg is breaking into the facility, and then it goes wrong, and Rebecca Ferguson has to dive in after him to save him, and that's very Mission Impossible. It has a great motorcycle chase. It has the break-in to fool the prime minister with masks. To me, that has the most MI elements executed at a breakneck speed. That movie clips for 2 hours and 10 minutes. But Fallout is probably the best made of all of them. It is probably the best action movie start to finish. The set pieces are immaculate. The supporting cast is top notch. And so they are connected, right? They're part 1 and part 2. And so I think that's a 1A. I would have Rogue Nation 1 and Fallout as the 1A. I think most people would have Fallout as the 1. But I think that's where the series peaks, hands down. I think if, my kids getting to the age where I've started to show her these movies, I only showed her 4, 5, and 6. She, I'll show her one. I don't know what I'll do with the other ones, but 4, 5, and 6 to me was the entry point to say like this is what
How old
quintessential.
is she?
She'll be 11 in a couple months.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, 4, 5, and
I,
but she's seen but she's seen so much Marvel and DC and all Star Wars at this point. Like she likes action, she likes the sort of the big blockbuster stuff, and the content other than a few bad words is not. There's not like there's a ton of blood. You know, it's not like killings are like grotesque.
Gruesome one. Yeah.
It's like so. So she liked it. I don't think it's like her favorite thing, but I think like she enjoyed 4, 5, and 6. And weirdly, like Tom Cruise is already like a movie star to her. She understands that like of all these like old generation stars, she's like Tom Cruise. And I showed her this trailer. I showed her a trailer for A Few Good Men. Just showed her the trailer because she's not ready to watch it yet. And I showed her a trailer of like 20 different movies from like the 80s, 90s, like aughts. And the number one movie she wanted to watch was Few Good Men. And she's like, because Cruise, he's like, he looks cool. Cruise is young. She's like, I want to see that. See, Tom Cruise still has that like.
Yeah, he has. You watch him.
Do anything. Watch him. I'll watch. Yeah.
I like Cocktails. We got to do our top 10 favorite Tom Cruise movies.
At some point, we definitely do.
Yeah.
We definitely do. You know, that's interesting. I think Pablo's perspective is really interesting, though. And it says a lot about the culture around these movies, that they're just not. This is not IP in the same way that Star Wars is.
Let's see what kind of takes people have on this one.
Pablo rides for John Woo.
Yeah, because I've heard people, not say that they don't like Mission Impossible 2, and I'm like, why? It has some good stuff in there. But anyway.
So the funny thing about that is like it was critically not liked in 2000 when it came out. But for the longest time, Mission Impossible 2 was the highest grossing movie in the franchise. It wasn't until Rogue Nation, I think, that they actually broke that record.
Brian, do you have a list of box office for them?
For Mission Impossible?
For Mission Impossible movies, yeah.
I don't have all of them. I know a few of them off the top of my head.
Because this is brought to you by Perplexity. So I don't know. This is adjusted for inflation.
Do you have it for global?
So that's what I want to ask you. If this is for global, because I asked for global box office returns.
Okay.
And so 96 was 457.
That's global.
Okay. So 2000, 549.
Yeah, global.
Mission Impossible 3. This is where it went down. Close. It was 399 from 400 mil.
Yeah, but that's adjusted for inflation, so that's lower at the time, and the movie cost like 150 at the time, so it lost money. Yeah.
Ghost Protocol 694.
There you go. Yeah. So
Rogue Nation 688.
Yep. And then
Fallout 786.
That's the high. That's the high point.
So we get an uptick.
That's the high watermark. And
Dead Reckoning, I mean, numbers don't lie, right? 565. What happened there?
Too long a movie. Did not have IMAX screens for that long. And there was some competitive pressure. I forget what big movie came along that wiped them out unexpectedly. There was a movie that came out right after that one that became a mega hit.
After Dead Reckoning?
Right after it, like a week later. I think it was a week later, and made it so like it just all of a sudden people went to see that and they didn't go to see Dead Reckoning as much. Oh, sorry. I know what it is. What comes out the next week is Barbenheimer.
Yeah.
Both movies come out and this movie gets wiped off.
Nobody was talking about Mission Impossible after. People were talking about this more. I don't even remember the conversation of Mission Impossible.
Because a week later, Barbie and Oppenheimer happened. And those two movies, neither one of us were expected to be billion-dollar movies. You wind up getting $2.5 billion a box off of the two of those. Oppenheimer seizes control of IMAX for a month, and Mission Impossible's forgotten. That's what happened.
Anything else, Brian?
No, I mean, I hope people could still go see it and enjoy, but I'd be curious as to opinions and comments about not just the rankings, but just like the impressions of this particular movie, because I was, yeah, I still liked it, but I was overall kind of disappointed and underwhelmed by some things.
Yeah. Yeah, so remember to hit that like and subscribe. Comment in the comment section below. Perhaps tell us your favorite Mission Impossible, your top five, top three, whatever. And what did you think of the final reckoning? Will we be seeing any more Mission Impossible movies? Obviously, yes, because it's an IP that has the potential of making big money if you create the right storyline. Are you tired of seeing the world in peril, man?
Um, I was gonna say, so first off, the other thing that's got to change if they bring this back, they got to fix Tom Cruise's hair, man. I was totally distracted by his hair in this one. It was bad. He's had some good hair in this series. This was bad hair. Um, I think my personal opinion. I don't know if they'll do this. I think we're ready for Mission Impossible to be a TV series again.
There you go.
That's how
There
I
you
would
go.
move on. See that because Cruise is too big to be a TV lead. So don't disrespect him in that manner. Let him produce Mission Impossible, the new Mission Impossible, the TV series, and then after that, bring it back, somewhere down the road as a feature film movie. I don't think they'll do that, but that's what I would do. It started as a TV series. Honor that.
One last thing before we go. Did they show the Naked Gun trailer?
Yes, they did. Everybody laughed at the one joke, man. I'm telling you, that is the most automatic is when OJ's picture comes up and that dude looks at the camera.
God, I
That's the
couldn't help
automatic.
myself,
That's the automatic. People are chuckling throughout because even like when Neeson first takes off the mask and he's supposed to believe he goes from being this little girl to a 6'3" Liam Neeson, but everyone laughs at the. Yeah, I think also because the thing about that is like I was thinking about that joke, right? So it's like if you saw the original movies, you probably have a sense that something like that joke is coming just because you know the cast list, right? If you didn't see it, OJ Simpson in that case, I think are big enough that like it spans generations. Like even if you weren't there for the trial, that person exists for people in some form.
They're still making documentaries of that thing, different types.
So it's got this weird like multi-generational appeal to when that joke can hit with a younger person who wasn't there in the 90s when that was actually happening.
Because they know the stories. They read the stories. And this guy, that OJ Made for America was captivating,
Yeah, no, I agree. You're right. People do revisit it. It brings it up all over again. I mean, you live a constant reminder of that trial because the entire like television world of CSI and forensics it exists because of that trial. So yeah, it is interesting that joke lands with everyone, as far as I've seen.
Oh yeah. People were laughing, People were laughing. But anyway, yeah, let us know in the comment section below what you guys thought of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, and we'll see you next time on the Nerd Report.